The night had ripped across the plains like a living thing, wild, vengeful, and relentless. Wind howled through the canyons, ripping shingles off roofs and tossing them like cards into the black. Lightning clawed across the sky, and thunder rolled so close it shook the bones of the earth. When it finally began to die, when the storm had half spent its fury, a lone rider emerged through the sheets of rain, his horse slick with mud, his coat heavy with water, and his lantern cutting a trembling circle through the gloom. Elias McGraw wasn't headed anywhere in particular. The storm had forced him off the trail toward Dry Creek, and now the air smelled of smoke, mud, and something else. Fear. The town was miles behind him, but he knew this stretch of land. Hensley's ranch, the old widow's place. Folks in town spoke her name in quiet tones. Mara Hensley, the one who never came down for church after her husband's accident, the one who kept to her fields and her grief. Elias saw the flicker of a collapsed barn through the haze of rain. The boards were splintered, the roof sagging. His gut clenched. He spurred his horse forward. "Whoa there," he whispered, sliding off into the mud, boots sinking deep. His lantern swung, the light trembling over wreckage and soaked hay. Then he saw her. She was on her knees near a post, clutching it like an anchor. Her hair hung in wet ribbons, sticking to her pale face, and blood streamed down from a cut near her temple. Her dress, white once maybe, was soaked through and streaked with dirt. "Ma'am?" he called, voice cutting through the hiss of rain. "You hurt?" She blinked up at him, eyes wide, unfocused. It came down on me," she whispered, the words barely finding shape. Her lips trembled. "The mare, she's trapped in there. Please, I couldn't get her free." Elias followed her trembling gesture toward the barn's broken frame. He didn't hesitate. He pushed through the tangle of beams, his hands bleeding from the splinters as he heaved aside the wreckage. The mare was pinned by one leg, eyes rolling in panic. "Easy, girl," he muttered, crouching low. He looped his rope under the beam and braced his shoulder. With a groan, he lifted, muscles screaming, mud sucking at his boots. The beam shifted, enough for the horse to kick free and stumble out into the rain. When Elias turned back, the widow was standing there, soaked, trembling, her hands clasped to her chest as if afraid to believe. "You got her," she breathed, her voice cracked like something unused to being heard. He nodded, chest heaving. "She'll live." Then her legs buckled. Elias caught her before she hit the ground. She weighed almost nothing, her body limp from exhaustion. For a moment, he just held her there, her head against his chest, her hair smelling faintly of rain and lavender. Something old and soft stirred inside him. "Easy now," he murmured, brushing mud from her cheek. "You're safe. Let's get you inside." Her eyes fluttered open, dazed. "I can walk," she said, though her knees told a different story. "I'm sure you can," he replied, his voice quiet but firm. "But not tonight." He lifted her, light as a bird in his arms, and carried her toward the cabin, the storm still whispering its dying song across the hills. The door creaked open to darkness and cold air. He stepped inside, found the hearth by instinct, and knelt to coax a flame from damp kindling. Soon the fire caught, painting the room in amber light. Elias removed his hat, shook off the rain, and looked around. The place was neat, almost painfully so. Every object had its place. Dust-free shelves, a folded quilt, a table with one chair. No sign of anyone else. Just the quiet order of someone surviving out of habit, not hope. He turned back to her. She sat near the hearth, arms wrapped around herself, dress clinging to her in a way that made him avert his eyes for decency's sake. "You're freezing," he said. "Let me fetch a blanket." But before he could stand, her hand caught his wrist. Her fingers were cold, trembling. "Don't go," she whispered. Elias froze. "Ma'am?" Her gaze lifted to his, and for the first time he saw the storm behind her eyes, years of loneliness, grief that had hollowed her out, leaving only a woman who didn't know how to ask for comfort anymore. "I can't stop shaking," she said softly. "I keep trying to hold myself together, but every time it rains, I hear him again. Carter. The night the horse threw him, the thunder sounded just like this." He didn't know what to say. He'd seen death on the plains, but grief like that, it didn't bleed, didn't scream, it just stayed. "You don't have to talk," he said finally. "Just rest. I'll be right here." She gave a small, broken laugh that wasn't quite laughter. "That's the thing," she said. "Nobody stays, not since he died. Folks send notes or food, but they don't stay." He crouched beside her, the firelight flickering between them. Her lips quivered as she looked at him, really looked. "You came out of nowhere tonight," she said, her voice barely a breath. "Like you were sent." He smiled faintly, rough hand running over his jaw. "No angels on my horse, ma'am. Just mud and bad luck." Something in that answer eased her for a moment. But then her eyes clouded again. "Maybe I just need to feel something that isn't loss." Her fingers, still clutching his wrist, tightened. "Elias, will you stay if I undress?" The words hung there, impossible and soft and shattering. The fire popped. Rain whispered against the windows. He didn't breathe for several seconds, every muscle caught between impulse and restraint. "Mara," he said, her name breaking low in his throat. "You don't need to do that." Her chin trembled. "Then why hasn't anyone stayed?" He saw it now, not desire, but the raw plea of someone forgotten, someone who thought the only way to keep kindness was to trade her dignity for it. He knelt, took her face gently in his rough hands. "Because they were fools," he said quietly, "because they didn't see you the way I do now." She blinked, tears finally spilling. "And how do you see me?" He smiled sadly, like a woman who's been strong too long. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was fragile, like the first quiet after a gunfight, when even the wind holds its breath. She lowered her eyes, and for the first time, she didn't pull away when he brushed the tear from her cheek. Elias found the quilt draped over the chair, shook it out, and wrapped it around her shoulders. "You're safe now," he murmured. She let out a sound, a sigh, or maybe the ghost of a sob. "You could have just passed by tonight," she whispered. "Why'd you stop?" He looked into the fire, eyes far away. "Because sometimes the trail takes you where you need to go, not where you planned." Her lips curved faintly. "Do you believe that?" "I do now." The wind eased outside. The mare snorted softly in the barnyard, alive and breathing. Inside, the two of them sat before the fire in silence. The widow's shaking slowed. Her head tipped slightly, resting against his shoulder. He didn't move. When she finally spoke again, her voice was drowsy. "Elias, do you have someone waiting for you?" He stared at the flames, the shadows dancing in their light. "Had," he said after a moment. "A long time ago. The prairie takes things, same as it gives." She nodded, eyes heavy. "Then maybe that's why you stopped. Maybe we're both just tired of losing." He brushed a strand of wet hair from her face. "Maybe." Minutes passed, then an hour. The fire crackled, steady and warm. Her breathing evened out. She'd fallen asleep, the blanket slipping from her shoulder. Elias gently adjusted it, making sure she stayed covered. Her hand, pale and delicate, rested near his. Without thinking, he covered it with his own. Outside, dawn began to break. Soft gray light spilling across the fields, touching the wrecked barn and the wet earth with a kind of forgiveness. He should have left before morning. That's what men like him did. They rode in, fixed what they could, and left before the world had time to hope for more. But when she stirred, whispering his name in her sleep, something in him decided otherwise. He stayed. When she woke, hours later, sunlight filled the room. She blinked, disoriented, then saw him by the fire, brewing coffee in a dented tin pot. "You stayed," she said quietly. He glanced back over his shoulder, half smiling. "You asked me to." Her breath hitched faintly. "I didn't mean it the right way last night." He poured her a cup and handed it over. "You meant it the way your heart needed to," he said. "Ain't no shame in that." She took the cup, hands trembling. "No one's ever spoken to me like that." Maybe they should have. A silence settled between them, not empty this time, but gentle. Outside, the sky was blue again. The smell of rain had turned to the clean scent of wet earth and pine. Mara looked toward the window, then back to him. "You'll have to rebuild the barn," he said, almost to fill the air. She smiled. A fragile thing, but real. "Will you help?" He hesitated. "You sure you want a stranger hanging around?" "You stopped being a stranger the moment you walked through that storm," she said softly. "Stay, just until the barn's done." He met her eyes. Something in them, hope, fear, something new, pulled him in deeper than he'd meant to go. "All right," he said finally, "just until the barn's done." But both of them knew that wasn't true. He'd already stayed once when he didn't have to. And as the morning sun caught in her hair and her lips curved in that shy, unpracticed smile, Elias McGraw realized he might not be riding out anytime soon. Outside, the prairie stretched endless and golden, the ruins of the storm glinting like tears drying in the light. Inside the little cabin, for the first time in a long while, the widow wasn't alone, and neither was he. And somewhere deep in the silence between their heartbeats, something began to heal.